Let's now deal with Kath's side. Dad's side was austere, sharp, unfriendly, unsociable, never spoke to anybody, none of them had any friends, isolated. Very, very strange group. As I said, not even my dad had many friends. I can't remember what I said Ginny's husband's name was in the first one, but it was Frank Steele, the chap with the gold watch. If I said that differently, it was Frank Steele. Kath's family. Kath's family, very different kettle of fish. They came from Folkestone. They were fisher folk. Huge family in the town, a bit like the mafia. Everybody knew everybody then. They were quite well-to-do in as much as they were part of important fisher folk family in a fishing town. So her mum, Edie, was Edie Virgo, was her maiden name. So again, some form of Italian is in there somewhere. There is also, and this is where the traveller comes from, there was Gypsy in Edie's family. Travellers, people from who knows where. It was a port, so the background of Edie is very deep. You will see in the families a very dark characteristic. In my mum's family, my mum had black hair, green eyes, and looked almost as if she came from the South Sea Islands. In my family, it was Beck. We were all blonde babies, blonde white curly hair, blue eyes. Beck, black hair, dark brown eyes. So one in each of the families, and when we go through Kath's brothers and sisters, each one of them had a very dark Italianate child. So there is a recessive gene in us somewhere. So Edie, wonderful, lovely, cuddly, fat grandma, not fat, but sort of large grandma, who just loved. Just what every child wanted. No one could do anything wrong. She just loved. She had a very large extended family in Folkestone, of which I knew 3 or 4 of her sisters. One of which was Aunt May, who had a sweet shop. So as a small child, we could go into Aunt May's shop and just have what we wanted out of the sweet jars, which was lovely. There was also an Aunt Ada and an Aunt Jess. Now Aunt Jess was the spinster sister. I think there were about 6 sisters in all. Some of them married quite well. May married well. She married the chap who owned the sweet shop. He then died very conveniently, leaving her money and the shop. But Jess was the eldest spinster sister and lived with Edie her whole life. And Jess's main life force was to upset Edie's husband, my grandfather, Bertie Vinyl. Now Bertie Vinyl is where the Jewish comes in. There is Jewish in us. Bertie was about 5 foot, if you could imagine. 5 foot, quite rotund, quite a big Jewish nose. So if you imagine those short Jewish men with glasses, quite froggy looking, that was Bertie. He was rather austere, rather sharp, didn't like kids, had his shed when we were kids, which we were not allowed in, and chicken runs for eggs and whatever. Everybody had chicken runs and pigs and things then. And we, when we arrived, like a flock of wild things, were in his chickens, upsetting them, and he used to just chase us everywhere. So you had Edie, Jess and Bertie. And Jess and Bertie didn't get on. They hated each other, but they had to live together their whole lives. When they all died, Bertie died first, then Jess, then Edie. So even in the cemetery, they're buried one on top of each other, with Jess in between. So, Kath's family. Eldest is Nora. Now I think it was Nora Jane, could be Nora Jane Ada or Nora Jane May, can't remember. They all had 3 names, loads of names. and she was short, feisty. Nobody, but nobody crossed Nora. Nora did exactly what she wanted. She was a bit like Beck, not particularly trustworthy. You couldn't leave anything out with Nora, it would just disappear. No, no malice intended, but she'd just say, "Oh, that's nice," and I'll have it. So, not 100% to be trusted, but very, very feisty. She had the temper of the family, and she eventually married Bob Coghlan. Now, Bob was Irish, tall, bluff, looked like Dixon of Dock Green, not very bright. Again, Nora and he fought like cat and dog their whole lives, absolutely their whole lives. And during the war, they married before the war, and during the war, Bob used to come home on leave. Nobody knew where Nora was. She met some bloke and was long gone, and she'd then come back and say, "Well, what do you expect?" You know, Nora was a good time girl, and very, very amusing. She was my favourite of all the aunts. She died. She came to my wedding, so she was still alive when I was into my late 20s, because we got married when I was 28. So I knew Nora most of my life, stayed with her often as a kid, and just a lovely, lovely woman. Again, just one of those aunts just out of storybooks. She had 3 children, Anne, Val and Sue. Anne was extremely dark, sharp, looked Spanish. Again, this is where the dark came out. Very angular, but Anne, again, lovely personality. She married Ray Parker, who was the best looking man in Folkestone. He was at that time in engineering, had a motorbike, and they would come down to Devon all the time, and he'd take us for rides on his motorbike, which was brilliant. He eventually worked on the ferries, but one of the ferries went down and he was traumatised and never fully recovered. The second sister, Val, was the warmest, kindest woman. These were 10 years older than me. Same age as probably Will and Ethel's daughter, Audrey. And I went to their wedding when I was about 6. Val married somebody Fagg. Arthur Fagg. She married Arthur Fagg, who was again very good looking in the Billy Fury style, with the hair slicked back in the, I suppose, early 70s. But again, wonderful. And the youngest daughter, Sue, was again cuddly, warm, lovely. Absolutely wonderful family. The next sister was Sybil Joan Ada. Now, Sybil was the whinging, sickly misery of the family. Tall, thin, whingy all the time, and my mother and her never, ever, ever got on. Sybil was one of those, "Can I have? She's got, why can't I have?" And was very unpopular. The only message about Sybil is that she was married before the war to Chris. Can't remember the surname. And he was in the RAF. He was short, ginger, sharp, nasty man, very, very nasty man. And he came home on leave one day, and there in the household was, of course, a little blonde baby, a GI baby, Sally. Now, Sally was the most beautiful girl anyone had ever seen, the most beautiful baby. And as she grew up, she would come down to Devon, and tall, thin, white blonde hair, looked Scandinavian, stunningly attractive girl. Chris led her a vicious dog's life, her whole life. And of course, we as children never understood why Chris hated her so much, and he was openly nasty to her whole life. Sybil had 2 children by Chris, names then, because I can't remember what they were called. One of them was dark, one of them was, oh, Richard and Lydia. Richard and Lydia. Richard was white blonde hair, Lydia, again, very, very dark, dark brown eyes. Richard was a little thin, wiry kid, very funny. We used to really get on terribly well, but never ever put on weight, very, very thin, always excess of energy, some vital stance the whole time. So he eventually became a car salesman in Folkestone, but he used to come down for the summer. Lydia was a whinger. Liddy, always whinging, whinging, whinging. If you touched her, oh, one of those. And of course, as kids, there'd be 7 or 8 of us kids running around playing in the summer, because all the family would drop the kids off in Devon for the whole summer. So there could be 7 or 8 of us, 10 of us. And she was always whinging, Liddy. So that was those. And Sally used to stay with us for much, much longer because she was older. Then there was Kath. Kath was an evil, evil bitch. She was the most beautiful. Most people would say, oh, my mother was beautiful. But Kath really was. Black hair with green eyes, slanted upwards, almond slanted up. Well, you know Kath, you remember what she looked like when she was old. Very high cheekbones, very nice mouth, lips, beautiful figure. Used to do modelling when she was 17, 18. Left school, 14, 15, hated it, but she was extremely sporty. She was in every team sport there was. She was a runner, jumper, hockey player, netball player, you name it. She was sport personified. But of course that didn't get you anywhere in the late 30s, 40s. She was born in 1918. Her mother had not a clue what to do with her. She was absolutely unmanageable. Kath. She thought she was a cuckoo in the nest. She never believed that she was part of that family. She never believed that her mum and dad were her mum and dad. She believed that she'd been somehow dropped in there in this awful family. And if she was out on the streets and she met her mum was not allowed to acknowledge her. Kath would walk by on the other side of the street, if she saw any of them, and if any of her friends said, who's that over there waving at you? She had no idea, don't know them. And they just accepted it, that Kath was Kath. Huge tantrums, her and Nora, because my mum was, when she left school, was put in to be a seamstress at Derry and Tom's, a very expensive department store in Folkestone. She hated it, but what it gave her was a sense of fashion. She, as I said, you couldn't buy clothes at those times. Everything had to be made for you, and in Derry and Tom's, very rich women would go in and have gowns made. Every stitch was hand stitched, no machines. So my mum would be doing hems and pockets and whatever, but what she got from it was, of course, the styles that these women were having. And her own clothes, she was very happy to make. She was not happy to be a servant to make clothes for anyone else. So she was always most fashionably dressed in the best materials, all nicked from Derry and Tom's, made at home. So she would have a new outfit every 2 or 3 days and thought herself the bee's knees. At that time, then the war came, and being in Folkestone, they had what was called the Lees Cliff, which was one of the most expensive and beautiful dance halls along the whole of the south coast there. And she would go out with her friend Laura Shrubsole, and 2 or 3 others with a cigarette, no money, and they would trail the dance halls, and they would just meet men, go up and say, hello darling, got a light. And that was it. They were so attractive, these group of girls, that got them in anywhere. We were now wartime, so you had the Shorncliffe army camp, so there was no shortage of men with money in their pockets, out for a good time. So that was my mum. We'll come on to how she met my dad later. After that was Harry. I don't know what Harry's real name is. I don't think it's Harry. He's the one who lives in Broadstairs. But No, I don't know what his name was. He would have had three names like all the others. It might be something like Steve, but he was always known as Harry. Harry was extremely bright, nearest one to you, passes 11 plus. They had enough money at that time to send him to grammar school. So he went to the grammar school, did extremely well, joined the electricity companies and managed one of the great big power stations. So he did extremely well. Married Paddy, Irish, red-haired, fiery. They row a lot. They're both still alive, and they rowed a lot, but always lovely to us. But Harry was unusual, being very intelligent. So as we were being brought up and we were intelligent on that next level, he seemed to fit with us extremely well. 3 children. God, no, what's the youngest is on Facebook now. So Harry had the eldest daughter was blonde, married an airline pilot. He was an absolute Virgin airline pilot. He was a bastard. Long gone. So the 2 girls and a boy. The boy was it was a terrible accident when he was about 5. One of the girls was sewing, and he came up behind her, and the needle went right through his eye. So he was blinded in one eye when he was about 5. But lovely, very sophisticated group of kids. I'll come to their names in a minute. And the youngest, Josephine, don't know what her other names were. Bright ginger, absolutely ginger. The youngest, forgotten child. The others had such big personalities that Josephine was often overlooked. And being a much younger child than any of them, it wasn't as if she was the young favourite. She was just forgotten. She married Pete Farmer. Pete Farmer was a bearded, glassed, bespectacled chap who had business pretensions, and every business he touched went broke. So they were forever doing moonlight flits. Suddenly they would turn up on your doorstep, say, we've had to move, can you put us up for a couple of weeks? And so they'd put them up. Went all around the country doing this. Eventually they went off to South Africa, and they were in South Africa starting up business after business after business, each of which went broke, and then they would flit and flit. And she was one everybody always felt so sorry for. Poor Joe, married to Pete. And he never ever saw it. Never saw it. They ended up as the grasskeepers at a golf club in Bristol, I think. They had twins. What were their twins called? Their twins. Yvonne was the youngest. Joanna and Yvonne. Joanna, bright white blonde hair. Yvonne, very dark. Another of the very dark ones. We spend lots of time with them as kids because they get dropped off. Joe and Pete would say, you know, we've got a bit of trouble here, can you just look after the twins for a couple of months? So they'd live with us for quite a while. So that's that family. Are you like any of those? No, you've got Harry's brains. Always outgoing parties. Whenever we used to go down there to Folkestone for the summer. No, never the summer, because Dad could never get away. So it'd be for Christmas, when I was about 5, 6, till I was about 9, every Christmas we'd go there. And Nan at that time lived in Canterbury Road, 33 Canterbury Road. The house is still there. And it was very large, and it was a converted convent. And at the back was a chapel, and we would all be there for Christmas, dozens of us. And Jess would look after us when, you know, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, they would all go out as a whole family to the pub, all of them, come back 1, 2 in the morning, blind drunk, all of them. But always, always happy times there, always no, they would fall out, but it was sociable. Very, very, very sociable family, in contrast to my dad's family. And occasionally, my dad's family would come as well. So Nan just never cared. We would be top and tailed, dozens of us, in beds all over the place. More the merrier. No one ever bothered about protocols and who did what and where and when, just a free-for-all. So that's their family. Can I remember Harry's children? Nope, can't. But I'll do it on perhaps the next one.